It was a crisp autumn evening in the suburban neighborhood where everything appeared serene on the surface. The houses were immaculate, lawns freshly trimmed, and children's bikes neatly parked along the sidewalks. Julia Anderson peeked out the large bay window of her living room, watching as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the neighborhood. She and her husband Tom were getting ready for a gala at his company, an annual charity event that required all the trappings of formal attire and polite conversation. Julia fidgeted with the pearl necklace around her neck, feeling uneasy about leaving their 6-year-old daughter, Emma, for the night. They had hired a babysitter from a reputable agency, but this would be the first time someone new would be watching over Emma. "Do you think this babysitter will be good?" Julia asked Tom, who was adjusting his cufflinks in the hallway mirror. "Julia, the agency came highly recommended. I'm sure it'll be fine," Tom replied, his voice calm but dismissive. The doorbell rang, and Julia's heart skipped a beat. "That must be her," she said, heading toward the front door. Tom followed closely behind, slipping on his jacket. Julia opened the door, expecting to see a familiar, comforting face, but instead, her smile faltered. Standing on the porch was a young black woman, dressed neatly in a casual sweater and jeans, her hands clasped together as she smiled warmly. "Hi, I'm Tanya," the woman said, extending a hand. "I'm here from the agency to babysit Emma." Julia froze for a moment, her mind racing. This wasn't what she had imagined. The woman standing before her was nothing like the babysitters she had seen in her neighborhood before, mostly young white women from local colleges. Her mind spun with excuses, reasons to send Tanya away, but none seemed to materialize. She hesitated, glancing back at Tom, whose expression mirrored her own discomfort. Are you sure you have the right house?" Julia asked, her voice faltering as she tried to maintain her composure. Tanya's smile faltered just a bit, but she kept her tone polite. "Yes, ma'am, the Andersons, right? I have all the details here," she said, holding up her phone to show the agency's confirmation email. Julia's pulse quickened as she glanced at the email. It was all correct. This was the right babysitter. She knew she couldn't outright refuse her, but something inside her tightened, an inexplicable, irrational discomfort. "I think there might have been a mistake. We, weren't expecting someone from the city," Julia stammered, her tone more apologetic than accusatory. Tanya's face remained calm, though a flicker of understanding crossed her eyes. She knew exactly what was happening. She had seen this look before, the polite hesitation, the subtle, unspoken message that she wasn't quite what they had pictured. But she had been trained to handle this. "I assure you, Mrs. Anderson, I've babysat for many families, and the agency has all my credentials. Emma will be in good hands," Tanya said, keeping her voice level and professional. Tom, standing just behind Julia, cleared his throat. "Do you have references?" he asked, his tone stiff. Tanya nodded. "Yes, of course. I've worked with several families through the agency, and I'm also CPR certified. I've been babysitting for over 5 years." Before Julia could respond, there was a loud thud from upstairs, followed by the sound of small feet rushing down the staircase. Emma, their daughter, appeared at the top of the stairs, her blonde hair bouncing as she hurried toward the door. "Is that my babysitter?" Emma asked excitedly, peering over the banister. "Is Tanya here?" Julia's eyes widened in surprise as Emma ran up to the door, her face lighting up when she saw Tanya. "Tanya, you're here!" Julia glanced at Tom, confused. "Wait, you know her?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, Mommy. Tanya babysat me at Lily's house during a sleepover last month. She's so much fun. She read me stories and taught me a new game." Julia blinked in disbelief, her mind racing to catch up. She hadn't been at that sleepover, so she hadn't met Tanya before. And yet, here was her daughter, bubbling with excitement, clearly thrilled to see her. Tanya's smile softened, her eyes meeting Emma's with warmth. "Hey there, Emma. It's good to see you again," she said, crouching down to Emma's level. "Are you ready for some more fun tonight?" Emma giggled, nodding eagerly, and reached for Tanya's hand as if they were old friends. Julia and Tom exchanged an awkward glance. This was the last thing they had expected. I didn't realize you'd met her before," Julia said, her voice quieter now, her earlier objections crumbling in the face of her daughter's obvious comfort with Tanya. Tom shifted uncomfortably beside her, still hesitant. It's just that we weren't really expecting... Before he could finish, Emma interrupted, her innocent voice cutting through the tension. Mommy, why don't you like Tanya? The question landed like a bomb, echoing in the air between them. Julia's breath caught in her throat, and she could feel the color drain from her face. Tom stiffened, his eyes darting toward his wife, unsure of how to respond. What do you mean, sweetie? Julia asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Emma looked up at her parents, her blue eyes wide with confusion. You always say people are nice when they help others, and Tanya's the nicest. Why are you being mean to her? The room went silent. Tanya stood there, her face calm, but her eyes revealing a quiet understanding. She had heard it all before, subtle rejections wrapped in politeness, people struggling to reconcile their discomfort with their desire to appear decent. But hearing it from a child, so innocent and unfiltered, was different. It exposed the raw truth in a way that nothing else could. Julia's heart pounded in her chest. Her daughter's words had cut straight through her defenses, forcing her to confront the reality of her actions. She had prided herself on being open-minded, on teaching Emma about kindness and respect for all people. But here she was, caught in a moment where her own biases had been laid bare, not by anyone else, but by her own child. I'm not being mean, Emma, Julia said weakly, struggling to find the right words. I just didn't know. Didn't know what? Emma pressed, her voice innocent but relentless. That Tanya's nice? She's the best babysitter. Julia felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. She glanced at Tom, who looked equally uncomfortable, but neither of them could deny the truth in their daughter's words. They had judged Tanya before even giving her a chance, and now their own child was calling them out on it. Tom cleared his throat, stepping forward. Emma's right, he said, his voice more composed now. We've been rude, and we owe you an apology, Tanya. Julia nodded, still feeling the sting of shame. Yes, we're sorry, she added quickly. We were wrong to make you feel unwelcome. We've just never had someone new before, and we overreacted. Tanya remained silent for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled softly. Thank you. I appreciate that, she said, her voice kind but firm. Emma, oblivious to the tension, tugged on Tanya's hand. Come on, Tanya, let's go play. Tanya chuckled, her eyes brightening. All right, let's go, she said, letting Emma lead her into the living room, where toys were scattered across the floor. As Tanya and Emma disappeared into the other room, Julia and Tom stood in the hallway, both feeling the weight of the moment settle over them. They exchanged a look, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Wow, Tom murmured, shaking his head. I didn't expect that. Julia let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Neither did I. The evening passed without incident. Tanya and Emma played games, read stories, and watched a movie together. The bond between them was clear, and Emma's happiness was undeniable. When Julia and Tom returned later that night, Tanya had already put Emma to bed. How did it go? Julia asked, feeling slightly awkward but genuinely curious. Tanya smiled as she gathered her things. Emma was great, as always. She's a joy to be around. Julia hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly. Thank you, Tanya. Not just for tonight, but for everything. I'm sorry for how we acted earlier. I didn't realize how much Emma adored you. Tanya looked at Julia, her gaze steady. It's okay, I understand, but I'm glad you gave me a chance. Tom, standing beside Julia, nodded. We're grateful for that, he said, his tone more sincere than it had been earlier in the evening. Tanya smiled one last time before heading toward the door. Take care, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, and tell Emma I'll see her soon. As the door closed behind Tanya, Julia and Tom stood in the quiet house, their minds still replaying the events of the night. Emma's innocent question, "Why don't you like Tanya?" lingered in the air, a reminder of how quickly the pure honesty of a child can lay bare truths that adults often try to hide or excuse. They walked together into the living room, the echoes of Emma's laughter still faint in the space. Julia sank onto the couch, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing the armrest as her mind replayed the entire interaction. "I can't believe we acted like that," she finally said, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, tinged with regret. Tom sat down next to her, resting his elbows on his knees. "Yeah, I don't know what got into us." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just, we had this picture in our heads, and when it didn't match up." "I know," Julia cut in, her voice tight. "But what does that say about us? Emma didn't see any of that. She just saw someone she liked, someone who was kind to her." Tom leaned back, letting out a deep breath. "She saw things more clearly than we did." For a moment, they sat in silence, both lost in thought. It was a strange feeling, being confronted by their own child's clarity and innocence in a way that forced them to confront something uncomfortable about themselves. Julia had always thought of herself as progressive, open-minded, the kind of person who would never judge someone by their skin color. Yet, tonight had revealed a truth she hadn't wanted to face. "We need to do better," Julia whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "For Emma's sake. For our sake. I don't want her growing up thinking it's okay to treat people like that." Tom nodded in agreement. "You're right. It's one thing to teach her about kindness and equality, but it's another to actually live it." Julia's eyes drifted toward the stairs, where Emma was sound asleep. "She's watching us, She sees everything." Tom followed her gaze. "Yeah, she does." As the clock ticked softly in the background, they both realized that this was more than just a moment of discomfort. It was a turning point. Emma's question had forced them to confront something they had perhaps been too blind or too afraid to see before. That the small biases, the unspoken discomforts, the things they brushed off as no big deal, were actually shaping how they moved through the world, and more importantly, how they raised their daughter to do the same. The next morning, Emma bounded downstairs with her usual energy, her blonde hair messy from sleep, and her favorite stuffed bunny clutched in her hand. "Morning, Mommy. Morning, Daddy," she chirped, climbing onto the chair at the breakfast table. Julia smiled at her daughter, feeling a tightness in her chest. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" "Uh-huh," Emma nodded, already shoveling cereal into her mouth. "Tanya said she'll come back soon. Can she, Mommy?" Julia exchanged a glance with Tom before answering. "Of course, sweetie, we'll ask her to come back." Emma beamed and went back to eating, her small world still full of the simple, joyful truths that children often carry. Later that day, as Julia tidied up the house, she found a crayon drawing Emma had made the previous night. It was a picture of herself, Tanya, and Emma holding hands, with a bright sun shining down on them. Beneath the drawing, in Emma's wobbly handwriting, were the words, "Tanya is the best." Julia stared at the picture for a long moment, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just a child's innocent scribble. It was a reminder of the truth Emma had seen so clearly, the truth that she and Tom had nearly ignored. People are people, and kindness transcends any differences. That evening, Julia called the babysitting agency. "Hi, I'd like to request Tanya again for our next night out," she said, her voice steady. The woman on the other end confirmed the booking, and Julia hung up the phone, feeling lighter. It was a small step, but it felt important. When she told Emma later that Tanya would be coming back, her daughter squealed with joy. "Yay, I love Tanya!" Emma exclaimed, throwing her arms around Julia's waist. Julia knelt down, pulling Emma into a tight hug. "You know what, sweetie?" she whispered into her daughter's ear. "I think I love her too." As the days went by, the memory of that evening stayed with Julia and Tom. It wasn't just about Tanya. It was about the way they approached the world, the way they judged others without realizing it. They began to catch themselves in small moments, questioning their assumptions, working to unlearn the biases they had unknowingly carried with them for so long. It wasn't an overnight transformation, but it was a start that had been sparked by their daughter's innocence and Tanya's quiet grace. The next time Tanya came to babysit, Julia and Tom greeted her warmly at the door, their smiles genuine and welcoming. This time, there was no hesitation, no awkward glances. Emma ran up to Tanya with open arms, and the house was filled with laughter and joy once again. And as Julia watched from the kitchen, she realized something. Sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected places. In this case, it had come from a child's simple, honest question and a babysitter's quiet dignity. Maybe, Julia thought, it wasn't too late to change, to be the kind of people they wanted Emma to look up to. And maybe, just maybe, they could teach their daughter that kindness wasn't just something you spoke about. It was something you lived, something you showed in every small moment to every person who walked through your door. Aaliyah Clark was a girl who never asked for attention. Quiet, smart, and observant, she glided through the halls of St. Mary's Middle School unnoticed by most of her peers. It wasn't that she wanted to be invisible, but the feeling of being different seemed to follow her like a shadow. At 13, Aaliyah had already learned that being a black girl in a predominantly white school came with challenges. She had been taught at home to be proud of her heritage, to wear her natural curls like a crown, and to embrace her darker skin with confidence. But middle school was a battlefield, and no amount of preparation could truly protect her from the unspoken, and sometimes spoken, cruelties of her classmates. Little did they know, Aaliyah was harboring a secret so powerful that when revealed, it would turn the entire school on its head. It started small, as these things often do. A few sneers in the hallways, snide remarks whispered just loud enough for Aaliyah to hear. The kind of casual cruelty that kids think doesn't matter, but cuts deep. It was Lily Anderson who led the charge. Blonde, popular, and known for her sharp tongue, Lily's words could leave invisible scars. At first, Aaliyah tried to ignore it. After all, her father always told her to choose her battles wisely. "Keep your head up, baby girl," he would say. "Not every fight deserves your energy." She clung to his advice as she brushed past the insults, pretending not to hear the giggles that followed her down the hallway. But Lily wasn't one to be ignored. One day, it escalated. Aaliyah was sitting in math class when she felt a cold splash of water hit the back of her head. She froze, her fingers tightening around her pencil as she heard Lily's mocking voice from behind her. "Oops, my bad," Lily snickered, her voice dripping with insincerity. The classroom erupted in laughter. Aaliyah's curls, which her mother had spent time carefully styling that morning, now dripped with water. She could feel the weight of the stares, the pity from some, and the glee from others. Her cheeks burned with shame, but still, she didn't say anything. She kept her eyes on the board, pretending like nothing had happened. But inside, something was shifting. Something was breaking. The cafeteria was always the worst. It was a stage where the invisible lines of popularity, power, and race were drawn. Aaliyah usually sat alone, not because she didn't have friends, but because even her closest friend, Maya, sometimes found it easier to blend into the background than sit with her in the spotlight of Lily's ridicule. On this particular day, Aaliyah had just sat down with her lunch when she noticed Lily and her crew approaching. Her stomach tightened. They rarely bothered her in the cafeteria. Too public, too many witnesses. But something was different today. "Hey, Aaliyah," Lily called out, her voice carrying across the room. "Mind if we sit?" Aaliyah didn't answer. She knew better than to engage, but before she could react, Lily's group had already surrounded her table. Lily leaned in close, her voice low but venomous. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Always acting like you're better than everyone else." Aaliyah blinked. "I've never—" But before she could finish her sentence, Lily reached out and slapped the sandwich from Aaliyah's hand, sending it flying to the floor. The cafeteria went silent. Lily stood up straight, her eyes cold. "You don't belong here," she sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're nothing." The words hit Aaliyah like a punch to the gut. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at her food scattered across the floor. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps as she felt every eye in the room on her, waiting. Something inside her snapped. Aaliyah stood slowly, her knees shaking, but her mind clearer than it had been in weeks. She looked around the cafeteria, at all the faces staring back at her, waiting for her to break down, to run away in tears. But she didn't. Instead, she looked Lily straight in the eye. "You think you can say whatever you want, because no one will stand up to you," Aaliyah said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm done being silent." Lily blinked, momentarily caught off guard. What are you talking about? Aaliyah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. You don't know anything about me. You don't know who I am or what I'm capable of. There was a ripple of murmurs through the cafeteria. A few students leaned in closer, intrigued. Lily crossed her arms, her smirk returning. Oh, really? And what makes you so special? Aaliyah took a deep breath. She had never wanted to play this card. She didn't want to be the girl who got special treatment because of who her father was. But this had gone too far. My father, Aaliyah said, her voice growing stronger, is, Malcolm Clark. The name hung in the air, heavy with weight. Several students gasped. Even Lily's smirk faltered for a moment. Malcolm Clark, the civil rights lawyer who had been on the news just a few weeks ago for winning a landmark case against a major corporation for racial discrimination. He was a man known for standing up against injustice, for fighting for people who couldn't fight for themselves. Aaliyah looked around the room, her heart racing. Yeah, that's right. The same Malcolm Clark who's coming here tomorrow to give a speech about bullying and equality. The same man who's been working with the school for weeks to investigate the bullying that's been happening here. She took a step toward Lily, her voice unwavering. And guess what? He's coming here. Because of me. Because I told him what's been happening. Because I've been dealing with people like you. Lily's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I didn't say anything for so long because I didn't want to cause trouble, Aaliyah continued. But now, I'm done staying quiet. You're not going to push me around anymore. The cafeteria was dead silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at Aaliyah, wide-eyed and shocked. Lily stumbled back, her confidence shattered. Her group, once so eager to follow her lead, now seemed to shrink away, avoiding her gaze. You think this changes anything? Lily stammered, but her voice lacked the venom it once held. So, what if your dad's some big-shot lawyer? I'm still what? Aaliyah interrupted, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Still black? Still different? You're right. I am, and I'm proud of it. Lily's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Aaliyah didn't wait for her to respond. She turned and walked away, her head held high, leaving Lily and the stunned crowd in her wake. She could feel the eyes on her, but this time, it didn't bother her. This time, she felt powerful. As Aaliyah left the cafeteria, Maya rushed up to her, her face a mixture of shock and awe. Aaliyah, I can't believe you just did that. Aaliyah smiled, though her heart was still racing. I can't believe it either, she admitted, but I'm done letting people like her push me around. Maya grinned. I'm so proud of you. The next day, the entire school gathered in the auditorium for the long-awaited assembly. There was a buzz of anticipation in the air. Everyone had heard about what happened in the cafeteria. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. When Aaliyah walked in, the whispers started. People pointed, stared, but this time it wasn't out of ridicule. This time, it was out of respect. She found a seat near the front, her heart pounding in her chest as the lights dimmed and her father took the stage. Malcolm Clark was a commanding presence, tall and confident, with a voice that could fill any room. He began his speech, talking about the importance of standing up against bullying, about the power of speaking out against injustice. But then, he paused. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Aaliyah. There's someone here today, he said, who has shown incredible strength and courage, someone who decided that enough was enough. Aaliyah's heart skipped a beat. My daughter, Aaliyah, stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. She faced something that no one should have to face, and she didn't back down. She spoke up, not just for herself, but for others. The room was completely silent. Aaliyah could feel every eye on her, but for the first time, she didn't feel small. She felt proud. I'm proud of her, her father continued, his voice filled with emotion. And I want all of you to remember something very important. You don't need to wait for someone to come and save you. You have the power within yourselves to stand up for what's right. You can speak out against bullying, against racism, against cruelty, and make a real difference. The audience sat in rapt silence, absorbing every word. Aaliyah's eyes misted, but she blinked back the tears. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, but this moment was different. She wasn't being stared at because of her skin, her clothes, or because of what Lily and the other bullies had done to her. She was being seen for her strength, her bravery, and the change she had sparked. Her father finished his speech with a powerful statement. When you see injustice, do not turn away. When you witness cruelty, speak out. Because the world doesn't change when people stay silent. It changes when ordinary people decide to be extraordinary. The room erupted into applause, echoing through the auditorium like thunder. Aaliyah could feel the vibrations in her chest, but it wasn't the applause that filled her with pride. It was the knowledge that she had stood up, not just for herself, but for every kid who had ever been bullied, for every child who had ever felt like they didn't belong. As the students filed out of the auditorium, several stopped to congratulate Aaliyah. Some simply nodded in respect, while others came up to her, offering words of apology and admiration. Maya rushed to her side, beaming with pride. Aaliyah, that was amazing. You were incredible. Aaliyah smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. Thanks, Maya. I couldn't have done it without you. As they made their way toward the exit, Aaliyah noticed Lily lingering by the door. Her usual smug expression was gone, replaced with something that looked like uncertainty, or maybe even regret. For a moment, their eyes met, and Lily hesitated. Lily began, her voice small and hesitant, a far cry from the girl who had humiliated Aaliyah in front of the whole school. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. Aaliyah held up her hand. You didn't realize what? That I was human? That your words hurt? Lily's face turned red. She looked down at the floor. I didn't think. I was just... She faltered, searching for an excuse, but there was none. Aaliyah took a deep breath. For a moment, she considered walking away, leaving Lily to stew in her guilt. But then she remembered her father's words about standing up for more than just yourself. I forgive you, Aaliyah said finally. Lily's head snapped up in surprise. But forgiveness doesn't mean there aren't consequences. You need to understand that what you did was wrong, and it hurt people. If you really mean what you say, then you need to make it right. Lily nodded slowly, looking humbled. I will, she whispered. Aaliyah didn't wait for more. She simply turned and walked away, Maya by her side. It wasn't about gaining power over Lily or anyone else. It was about reclaiming her own sense of worth, of knowing that she had done the right thing, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been mistreated. The days following the assembly were different. Aaliyah noticed that people treated her with a newfound respect. The students who once ignored her now smiled and greeted her in the hallways. The whispers that used to follow her were replaced with nods of recognition. But what mattered most was the change in herself. Aaliyah felt lighter, as if the weight of years of silent suffering had been lifted. She was no longer the quiet girl who let the world pass her by. She had a voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it. As Aaliyah and Maya walked through the school courtyard after class, Maya turned to her with a grin. So, what's next for you, Ms. Civil Rights? Aaliyah laughed, a real, genuine laugh. I don't know, but whatever it is, I won't be afraid to speak up. As they headed toward the school gates, Aaliyah looked back one last time. The place that had once felt like a battlefield now felt like a space she had conquered. It wasn't that the bullies had disappeared or that injustice would magically go away, but Aaliyah had learned something more powerful than all of that. She had control over her own story, and that was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. A few months later, the school held another assembly. This time, it wasn't just about bullying. It was about inclusion, empathy, and the strength to stand up for one another. The administration had taken Aaliyah's story to heart, and with her father's help, they created a program that encouraged students to speak out against injustice in all its forms. Lily, who had once been the school's biggest bully, was now one of the program's most active participants. She spent her time helping other students understand the importance of kindness and empathy. Though she had a long way to go in earning back everyone's trust, she was trying. And Aaliyah? She became the face of that change, not because she wanted the spotlight, but because she knew that her story had the power to inspire others. She had learned that sometimes standing up for yourself wasn't just about you. It was about creating a ripple effect that could change the lives of others. And that, in the end, was what truly blew everyone away. The sun hung low in the sky, casting an amber glow over Maplewood High School's track. It was a typical afternoon, where the sounds of sneakers pounding the pavement mingled with the sharp shouts of encouragement from teammates. This was a sacred space for many, a sanctuary where dreams of athletic glory were nurtured. Among them was Jamal, a young black athlete whose talent had begun to shine brighter than anyone had anticipated. But there was a storm brewing beneath the surface. Coach Thompson, the head coach of the track and field team, paced along the sidelines like a caged lion, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was a man of few words, and those words often cut like a knife. He had a reputation for being tough, but his discipline often crossed the line into humiliation, especially towards Jamal. The irony was thick. Here was a coach who had once been an athlete himself, yet the world had soured him, twisting his pride into prejudice. As Jamal prepared for another day of practice, he couldn't shake the feeling that Coach Thompson was watching him with a critical eye, looking for any chance to pounce. Jamal was more than just a gifted runner. He was the kind of kid who stayed late after school to practice, perfecting his stride and building his endurance. He had dreams bigger than the track, aspirations that soared as high as the Olympic podium. But his path was strewn with obstacles, both on and off the field. Coach Thompson had once been a celebrated sprinter, a local hero in his youth. Yet now, bitterness clouded his judgment, and his skewed view of the world made him dismissive of athletes he deemed unworthy. He often directed his ire towards Jamal, whose talent he begrudged. "Speed means nothing if you don't have the heart," Coach Thompson would often bark, staring Jamal down as if trying to strip him of his spirit. Jamal would nod silently, letting the words wash over him, but deep down, the hurt lingered. At home, Jamal found solace in his mother, Linda, a single parent who worked 2 jobs to support her son's dreams. She was his greatest advocate, instilling in him the values of hard work and resilience. Every evening after long hours at the diner, she would sit with him, listening to his stories and fueling his ambitions. "You're destined for greatness, Jamal," she would say, her eyes gleaming with pride. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." It was during a pivotal practice session that the boiling tensions finally erupted. The team gathered on the track, eager to demonstrate their progress. Jamal was particularly enthusiastic, eager to show the results of his relentless training. He could feel the energy buzzing around him, and as he lined up with his teammates, he was ready to race. But the moment he took off, Coach Thompson's harsh voice cut through the air. "Look at him, running like a wild animal," he sneered as Jamal flew past his teammates. "No discipline, no finesse. You think this is a game?" Jamal's heart sank. He had felt the stares of his teammates, the awkward silence that followed Coach Thompson's words. It was a familiar sting, the kind that came with being a black athlete in a world that often saw him as less than. "Keep your head up, Jamal," one teammate whispered, but Jamal was already lost in the chaos of his own thoughts. How could he prove himself when the man who was supposed to lead him forward was determined to hold him back? The practice continued, but the air was thick with tension. Coach Thompson continued to berate Jamal, each insult layered with venom. Jamal felt his confidence slipping, but he channeled that pain into his running, pushing himself harder than ever. With each lap, he focused on the finish line, imagining the thrill of crossing it first. The next few weeks were a blur of grueling practices and emotional turmoil. Jamal trained harder than he ever had, determined to turn the pain of Coach Thompson's words into fuel for his ambition. He ran early in the morning, sprinted on the weekends, and even joined local running clubs to improve his skills. His teammates began to notice the shift in Jamal. Instead of being defeated, he became a beacon of hope and determination. They rallied behind him, whispering words of encouragement during practice, even challenging the coach's harshness in subtle ways. One afternoon, while they rested between drills, one of his teammates, Michael, turned to Jamal. "You're faster than anyone here, man. Just wait until the championship. Thompson doesn't know what he's talking about." "Thanks, Mike," Jamal replied, forcing a smile. "I just need to keep my head down and keep running." But it wasn't just his teammates who noticed. News of Jamal's impressive times began to spread beyond the school walls. Local newspapers picked up on his achievements, and soon scouts began to take an interest. Jamal's dream of becoming an Olympic athlete seemed to inch closer with every practice. However, Coach Thompson remained skeptical. He continued to dismiss Jamal's achievements, often comparing him unfavorably to his previous star athletes. "You're not built for this," he'd say. "You think you can make it to the Olympics? You're just another wannabe." Each comment felt like a dagger to Jamal's heart, but he clung to his mother's words. He envisioned her standing at the finish line, cheering him on. The thought became his anchor, grounding him as he faced the coach's relentless negativity. The day of the regional track championship arrived, bright and clear. The atmosphere was electric with excitement as athletes from all over gathered to compete. Jamal stood at the starting line, his heart pounding in his chest. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but all he could hear were the echoes of Coach Thompson's voice. "Show them what you're made of, Jamal," he whispered to himself, envisioning his mother's smile, the pride in her eyes. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him as he took a deep breath, preparing for the race of his life. As the starting gun fired, Jamal surged forward, his feet flying over the track. The rhythm of his breathing matched the pounding of his heart, and with each stride, he felt a surge of power. He was running not just for himself, but for every time someone had doubted him. Midway through the race, he could feel his competitors gaining on him, but instead of faltering, he dug deeper. The finish line loomed ahead, and in that moment, Jamal remembered the many times he had pushed through pain, the countless mornings he had woken up early to train. He crossed the finish line first, breaking the school record. The crowd erupted into cheers, and his teammates surrounded him, lifting him into the air. Jamal was overwhelmed with emotion as he basked in the thrill of victory. But Coach Thompson's reaction was muted. He stood at the sidelines, arms crossed, a scowl etched onto his face. The dissonance between the celebration and the coach's disdain was palpable. Jamal looked over, expecting a nod of acknowledgement or even a reluctant praise, but all he saw was the man who had tried to tear him down. After the race, Jamal was approached by a former Olympic athlete who had come to watch. "Congratulations, young man. I heard a lot about you. You have real talent," he said, clapping Jamal on the back. As the former Olympian walked away, Jamal caught sight of Coach Thompson. "You think you can just come in here and take credit?" Thompson sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Jamal, fueled by the day's events, turned to face him. "I didn't take anything, Coach. I earned this. Maybe you should start believing in your athletes instead of tearing them down." The words hung in the air, a challenge that caught even the coach off guard. For the first time, he saw the strength in Jamal's eyes, the determination that had fueled his journey. News of Jamal's victory spread like wildfire. Local news stations wanted interviews, and college scouts lined up to see him in action. He was suddenly the star of Maplewood High, and the once doubtful whispers transformed into cheers of support. As the weeks went on, Jamal continued to train harder, preparing for the state championship. He surrounded himself with teammates who believed in him and distanced himself from the negativity that had once overshadowed his ambition. Meanwhile, Coach Thompson began to reflect on his behavior. The look of pride on Jamal's face, the respect he earned from his teammates, and the encouragement from the former Olympic athlete struck a chord deep within him. Perhaps his methods needed to change. Perhaps he needed to be more than just a coach who yelled. He approached Jamal one day after practice, a tentative expression on his face. "I've been hard on you," he admitted, his voice softer. "Maybe too hard. I see your potential now, Jamal. I want to help you reach it." Jamal was taken aback, his guard up, but he saw something in the coach's eyes, a flicker of respect that had been absent before. "Thank you, Coach," he said cautiously. "I appreciate it." As the state championship approached, Jamal stood on the starting line, his heart filled with hope. The challenges he had faced had only made him stronger. He glanced around at the crowd, at his teammates who had rallied behind him, and at his mother, Linda, standing proudly in the stands, her face beaming with encouragement. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The sounds of laughter, cheers, and the rhythmic clapping of supportive fans created a symphony of encouragement that resonated deep within him. Jamal took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. The The starter raised the gun, and Jamal's pulse quickened. He remembered every hour spent training, every moment of doubt he had pushed through, and every time he had been underestimated. This race was more than just a competition. It was a culmination of all his struggles, his dreams, and his determination. The gun went off, and he launched into the race, his legs moving as if they had a mind of their own. He felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins as he raced ahead, every stride echoing the lessons he had learned along the way. The cheers of the crowd faded into the background. All that mattered was the rhythm of his breath and the sound of his feet hitting the track. As he approached the final stretch, the finish line came into view, but he was not alone. Two competitors flanked him, and the finish line loomed ahead like a beacon of hope. Jamal could feel their presence, the pressure building, but instead of faltering, he pushed himself harder. He remembered Coach Thompson's words from the past few weeks, the encouragement, the support, and it spurred him on. "Run, Jamal. You've got this." He heard Linda's voice, clear and unwavering, cutting through the noise. With every ounce of strength he had left, he surged forward, pouring everything he had into those final moments. He crossed the finish line, and the world around him exploded in cheers. For a heartbeat, he stood there, breathless and in disbelief, before the realization of victory washed over him like a wave. He had done it. He had become the state champion. Jamal turned to find his teammates rushing towards him, enveloping him in a sea of congratulations. Laughter and shouts filled the air, and for a moment, all the hardships, the doubts, and the criticisms melted away into pure joy. Coach Thompson approached, a rare smile breaking through his usually stern demeanor. "You've shown incredible heart out there, Jamal. I'm proud of you. I see now that you're not just an athlete. You're a champion." Jamal's chest swelled with pride, but it was not just the trophy in his hand that mattered. It was the recognition, the respect, and the understanding that he had earned through hard work. He looked at Coach Thompson and nodded, the animosity that had once existed between them fading into a newfound camaraderie. "Thank you, Coach. I appreciate it," Jamal replied, his voice steady. As the celebration continued, Jamal spotted his mother in the stands, tears glistening in her eyes. He ran over, enveloping her in a warm embrace. "We did it, Mom. I did it," he exclaimed, the joy bubbling over. "You did it, baby. I always knew you could," she cried, pulling back to look him in the eye. "This is just the beginning. The Olympics are waiting for you." In the weeks that followed, Jamal's life transformed. He received invitations to prestigious running camps, and scouts from top colleges expressed interest in his talent. Each step of the journey brought him closer to his Olympic dreams, and he was determined to seize every opportunity. Coach Thompson became an ally, changing his coaching style to better support his athletes. He focused on building their strengths and cultivating their talents, using Jamal as an example of what true dedication could achieve. The dynamic between them shifted, and Jamal found himself motivated not just by his own dreams, but by a desire to lift others as well. The Maplewood track team became a force to be reckoned with, and Jamal often took on a mentorship role for younger athletes. He shared his story with them, emphasizing the importance of perseverance, hard work, and the need to rise above adversity. One afternoon, during a practice session, Jamal gathered the team. "Listen up, everyone," he called, capturing their attention. "I want you all to know that no matter what anyone says, you have the power to define your future. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do." The words resonated, igniting a spark in the hearts of his teammates. They ran with renewed determination, each stride echoing Jamal's passion. Years later, as Jamal stood at the Olympic trials, ready to take the next step toward his ultimate dream, he reflected on how far he had come. The memories of Coach Thompson's harsh words had faded, replaced by the strength he had gained through overcoming them. As he lined up at the starting blocks, he closed his eyes, envisioning the journey that had led him here, the struggles, the triumphs, and the support of those who believed in him. He opened his eyes, focused on the track ahead, and took a deep breath. The starter's gun fired and he launched forward, propelled by the dreams of his past and the promise of his future. The race was on, and Jamal was ready to claim his place among the champions. Jasmine had always loved the smell of coffee, The rich aroma of freshly ground beans and the soft hum of chatter around the cafe always felt like a small slice of peace amidst the chaos of life. For as long as she could remember, she had been drawn to the warmth and comfort of coffee shops. So when she started working at Bean and Bliss, the upscale coffee shop in the heart of downtown, she knew it was a perfect fit for her, at least for now. What no one knew was that this job, this role as a barista, was far from the limit of Jasmine's life. "Grande caramel macchiato, extra shot, no foam," she called out with a smile, setting the steaming cup on the counter. "Thank you, Jasmine." A regular customer smiled back as he grabbed his drink. Everyone liked Jasmine. She was quick, efficient, always kind, and most importantly, she knew how to handle the sometimes overwhelming crowds that filtered in and out of the cafe during peak hours. Today, however, felt different. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and she had a feeling it wasn't just the rain clouds gathering outside. Then the door swung open, and in walked Mark. Mark was trouble, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit with the air of someone who believed he was better than anyone else in the room. He was one of those customers that every barista dreaded, impatient, condescending, and always ready to make a scene. Jasmine had dealt with him before, but today he seemed particularly agitated. The moment he stepped inside, the mood in the cafe seemed to shift. He strutted up to the counter, his eyes scanning the menu as if it were beneath him. Jasmine braced herself. She could feel his annoyance before he even spoke. "You, again," Mark muttered under his breath, loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "Do they not have anyone more competent working here?" Jasmine smiled politely, even as her heart sank. "Good afternoon, Mark. What can I get started for you today?" Mark rolled his eyes. "Get me a venti mocha latte, extra hot, 3 shots of espresso, no whip, and make it. Fast." "This time. Last time you were so slow I thought I'd die of old age." Jasmine nodded, refusing to let his words get under her skin. "Of course. 1 venti mocha latte coming right up." As she turned to prepare the drink, she could feel his eyes on her, scrutinizing her every move, waiting for her to make a mistake. The other customers in the cafe noticed too, their glances filled with discomfort. But no one said a word. "Unbelievable," Mark muttered again. "Can't find good help anywhere these days. And look at this place, it's full of idiots." Jasmine's fingers twitched as she tightened her grip on the espresso machine's handle. She wasn't new to this kind of treatment. In fact, she had encountered it far too often. People who assumed she was just a nobody, a lowly barista they could talk down to because of her race, her gender, or simply because they thought she wasn't worthy of respect. But Jasmine had learned long ago to rise above it. What they didn't know about her would be their undoing. She quickly finished the drink and handed it to Mark with a smile. "Here you go. Venti mocha latte, just how you like it." Mark grabbed the cup without so much as a thank you, sneering at her. "I'll be amazed if you didn't mess this up. Probably too busy thinking about your nails or whatever it is girls like you worry about." Jasmine's smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered, standing tall. "I hope you enjoy your drink," she said evenly, refusing to rise to his bait. Just as Mark was about to walk away, he took a sip of his latte and froze. His eyes narrowed, and he stormed back to the counter. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "Did you hear a word I said? I asked for extra hot. This is barely warm." Jasmine frowned slightly. "I'm sorry about that. Let me remake it for you." "Don't bother," Mark snapped. "You wouldn't know how to do your job, even if someone spelled it out for you. People like you should stick to what you're good at, whatever that is." The cafe had gone silent. Customers stared at Mark, then glanced at Jasmine, clearly uncomfortable with the way he was treating her. Jasmine could feel the heat of their stares, but she kept her head high. She wasn't going to let him get to her. As Jasmine was about to apologize again, her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a quick message from her father, reminding her about a meeting later that day. She quickly replied, assuring him she'd be there. In her rush, she didn't realize Mark was still watching her closely. "Who do you think you are, texting on the job?" Mark sneered. "Maybe that's why you can't even make a cup of coffee right. Too busy playing on your phone. This is exactly what's wrong with people today." Jasmine took a slow breath, the tension building inside her. This time, she didn't smile. "I'm very sorry, sir, but I'll have to ask you to calm down. I've remade your drink, and if you have further complaints, I'll gladly get the manager." Mark scoffed, his face turning red with frustration. "Manager? I don't need to talk to some underqualified, overpaid manager. You people are all the same, lazy, useless, and good for nothing but standing behind a counter." Jasmine stood still, her heart racing. She wanted to respond, wanted to tell him that his assumptions about her were not just wrong, but insulting. But she had promised herself she wouldn't lose her cool, no matter how demeaning the situation became. Still, her resolve was being tested. At that moment, the cafe's manager, Lisa, stepped out from the back. She had overheard the commotion and could tell something was wrong. Lisa was a short, blonde woman with a no-nonsense attitude, and she wasn't about to let anyone bully her staff. "Is there a problem here?" Lisa asked, stepping up beside Jasmine. Mark turned to her, his face twisted in annoyance. "Yeah, there's a problem. Your employee can't seem to make a decent cup of coffee and has the nerve to act like I'm the one being unreasonable." Lisa raised an eyebrow, glancing at Jasmine, who gave her a small nod. "I see," she said carefully. "Well, I apologize if the service wasn't up to your standards, but I would ask that you treat our staff with respect." "Respect?" Mark let out a bitter laugh. "You want me to respect someone who can't even do their job? You must be joking." Lisa's expression hardened. "Jasmine is one of our best baristas, and I won't tolerate anyone speaking to her, or any of our staff, that way." For a moment, it seemed like Mark might back down, but then, in a fit of frustration, he threw the barely touched coffee into the trash and glared at Jasmine. "You won't last long in this world, sweetheart. People like you never do." Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed again. This time, Mark caught a glimpse of the message flashing on her screen. It was a reminder from her father about the meeting later at Caldwell Enterprises, one of the largest corporations in the city. Mark's eyes flickered with recognition. "Caldwell Enterprises?" he asked, his tone suddenly curious. "Why would someone like you be texting with them?" Jasmine hesitated, realizing he had seen the message. She could tell from his expression that his interest had been piqued, but she wasn't ready to reveal the truth just yet. "I'm meeting with someone later," she said vaguely, hoping that would satisfy his curiosity. But of course, it didn't. Mark's eyes narrowed as he stepped closer, his demeanor shifting from anger to suspicion. "Meeting with someone? A barista like you? At Caldwell Enterprises? Don't make me laugh." Jasmine didn't respond, simply turning away to help the next customer, but Mark wasn't done. "You must know someone there, huh? Maybe a friend in low places. No way someone like you has any real connections." Lisa stepped forward, about to escort Mark out of the cafe, when the door opened once more, and a tall man in a sharp, expensive suit walked in. He scanned the room before his eyes landed on Jasmine, and a warm smile spread across his face. Jasmine," he called out, his voice loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. Mark turned around, confusion washing over his face as the man approached Jasmine and gave her a hug. "I hope I'm not interrupting your shift too much. We've got that meeting at 3 p.m., remember?" Jasmine smiled, visibly relieved to see him. "Of course, I'll be there." The entire cafe was silent as the man turned to Lisa and nodded politely before addressing Jasmine again. "Your father mentioned that today's meeting is important. Caldwell Enterprises is looking forward to your input." Mark's jaw dropped. "What?" he stammered, completely caught off guard. "Her father?" The man smiled, not noticing Mark's confusion. "Yes, her father. He's eager to hear your thoughts on the expansion plans for Caldwell Enterprises, Jasmine. You've always had an eye for strategy." Jasmine nodded, maintaining her composed demeanor despite the growing tension in the room. The moment of revelation was approaching, and the shift in Mark's expression made it clear that he was beginning to realize just how wrong he had been. Lisa, the cafe manager, looked at Jasmine with a mix of pride and surprise, though she'd known bits of Jasmine's story. The other customers had fallen completely silent, some casting glances at Mark, eager to see how this would unfold. Mark swallowed hard, his arrogance evaporating as reality set in. Jasmine Caldwell, the young black barista he had belittled, was the daughter of the CEO of Caldwell Enterprises. one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the city. Not only that, but she was apparently heavily involved in the family business, far more than anyone, especially Mark, could have guessed. Jasmine's colleague stepped forward to take over the counter, allowing her to step aside and speak to the man in the suit, her father's trusted associate. They talked in hushed tones about logistics and schedules for the upcoming meeting, but as they spoke, Jasmine could feel Mark's stunned gaze still lingering on her. She turned back to him, her eyes meeting his. "You," Mark stammered, his usual confidence completely shattered. "You're Caldwell's daughter? The Caldwell?" Jasmine gave a slight nod. "Yes, but that doesn't change anything about what just happened." Mark's face turned pale as he realized the weight of his actions. He had insulted, belittled, and harassed the daughter of one of the most powerful men in the city, and now there was no way to take it back. The smug entitlement he had walked in with had been wiped clean, replaced by an awkward, panicked energy. I didn't know," Mark stammered, desperately trying to salvage the situation. "If I had known, I would never have—" Jasmine held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "Exactly. If you had known who I was, you would have treated me with respect. But here's the thing, Mark. I'm not asking for respect because of my father's status or my involvement in the company. Respect shouldn't be conditional on someone's title or wealth. It's something everyone deserves, whether they're a CEO, a janitor, or a barista." Mark opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His face flushed with embarrassment as the weight of Jasmine's words sank in. The entire cafe was watching now, and the silence was thick with anticipation. Mark's usual smugness had been replaced by an air of desperation, and for the first time since he had walked into the cafe, he was the one who felt small. Jasmine continued, her voice calm but firm. "People like you think you can treat others poorly because you assume they're beneath you. You didn't even see me as a person. But you know what? It doesn't matter what job I have, where I come from, or who my father is. What matters is how you treat people, period." Mark's eyes darted around the room looking for a way out. I'm sorry," he finally blurted out. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to." Jasmine nodded. "I understand, but let's be clear. Your apology doesn't mean much if it's only coming because you found out who I am. If you truly regret how you acted, maybe you should think about how you treat people every day, not just the ones you think can benefit you." Mark's face was now a deep shade of red. He looked down at the floor, utterly defeated. There was nothing left for him to say, no more excuses to make. Lisa, the manager, stepped forward. "Mark, I think it's time for you to leave," she said firmly. "We won't tolerate this kind of behavior here." Without another word, Mark turned and hurried out of the cafe, his head hung low. The door swung shut behind him, and the tension that had gripped the cafe finally began to ease. A few moments passed in silence before the regular customers slowly began whispering to one another, some casting impressed glances at Jasmine, while others muttered about how Mark had gotten exactly what he deserved. Jasmine, for her part, remained poised, though the weight of the moment was not lost on her. The man in the suit, her father's associate, smiled at her. "I'll see you at the meeting," he said softly. "Your father will be proud to hear how you handled yourself today." Jasmine gave a small nod. "Thanks," she said, her voice soft but steady. As the man exited the cafe, Jasmine turned back to Lisa, who gave her a proud smile. "You did good, Jasmine. Real good." Jasmine smiled back. "Thanks, Lisa. I just wanted to make sure he understood." "He definitely did," Lisa said, nodding. "I think you taught him a lesson he won't forget anytime soon." Jasmine looked around the cafe, where the atmosphere had returned to its usual lively hum. The customers were back to their conversations, and the staff had resumed their work. For a moment, Jasmine just stood there, taking it all in. She had always known that people like Mark existed, people who would look down on her because of the color of her skin, her job, or just because they thought they were better than everyone else. But today, she had stood up not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been treated the way Mark had treated her. In the end, it wasn't about her secret identity or her father's status. It was about something much bigger, about reminding people that dignity and respect are not privileges to be earned, but rights that belong to everyone. As Jasmine tied her apron back on and returned to the counter, a warmth settled over her. She might be the daughter of a CEO, but today she was proud to be just Jasmine, the barista who demanded respect, not because of her connections, but because she, like everyone else, deserved it. And that was more than enough. It was a bright Saturday morning when the Williams family first moved into their new apartment. The mother, Lisa, her husband Marcus, and their two young kids were excited for a fresh start. The apartment wasn't big or fancy, but it was clean, cozy, and in a good neighborhood. Lisa had worked hard to find a safe place for her family. She wanted her kids to grow up in a community that was quiet and peaceful. Their landlord, Mr. Davis, seemed polite enough at first. He was an older white man, always dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, with a slick smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When he handed over the keys to Lisa and Marcus, he gave them a tour of the place, explaining the rules with an almost rehearsed precision. "I like my tenants to follow the rules," he said, eyeing their children who were quietly standing by. "We don't tolerate any trouble here." At the time, Lisa shrugged it off as Mr. Davis just being a strict landlord, but something about the way he looked at them, cold and calculating, made her feel uneasy. A few weeks passed, and the Williams family was settling into their new life. The kids were adjusting well to school, and Lisa was busy juggling her work as a real estate lawyer, while Marcus worked long shifts at his construction job. Everything seemed perfect. But soon, strange things started happening. One evening, as Lisa was preparing dinner, Marcus brought in a letter from Mr. Davis. "Hey, check this out," he said, frowning. The letter was a formal complaint. It claimed the Williams family was making too much noise at night, disturbing the peace of other tenants. Lisa was confused. They were a quiet family, and she couldn't think of a single time they'd made any noise past the kids' bedtime. Marcus shrugged it off. "It's probably just a misunderstanding. I'll go talk to him tomorrow." But when Marcus spoke to Mr. Davis, the landlord's response was sharp. "I've received complaints from other tenants," Mr. Davis insisted, his slick smile now gone. "You need to keep your kids under control or you'll be out of here." From then on, more letters started coming. Complaints about the garbage being placed incorrectly, accusations of them damaging property, claims that the family wasn't paying rent on time, even though Lisa made sure the rent was paid early every month. Mr. Davis began increasing the rent without warning. "I'm sure this is illegal," Lisa whispered to Marcus one night, reading through another inflated rent bill. But she didn't want to stir the pot just yet. "Maybe he's just testing us. Let's stay calm." Things escalated quickly. One rainy afternoon, while Lisa was at work and Marcus was picking up the kids from school, Mr. Davis slid a letter under their door, an eviction notice. When Lisa saw it later that evening, her heart sank. "Unpaid rent?" she muttered in disbelief. "We've never missed a payment." She immediately checked their payment records, and as she suspected, every payment was made on time. This eviction notice wasn't about missed rent. It was about something else. Marcus was furious. "That man's just looking for a reason to get rid of us," he shouted, pacing the kitchen. "He doesn't want us living here." Lisa nodded. She'd been calm up until this point, but now she knew something had to be done. She didn't reveal much of her plan to Marcus, but she had an idea. "We'll fight this," she said calmly. "Just leave it to me." The next morning, Lisa called Mr. Davis to set up a meeting, but as expected, he didn't take her seriously. He smugly repeated his accusations over the phone. "You people think you can stay here without following the rules. You can't afford to fight this in court. Just pack up and leave," he said, before hanging up abruptly. But what Mr. Davis didn't know was that Lisa wasn't just any tenant. She was a real estate lawyer with over a decade of experience. For years, she had helped families facing unlawful evictions, and now it was her own turn to take down a corrupt landlord. Lisa began gathering all the necessary documents. She printed out receipts, emails, and text messages showing the rent had been paid early every month. She collected the false complaints Mr. Davis had sent and even spoke to some neighbors who were willing to testify that there were never any noise issues. Mr. Davis, however, continued to underestimate her. He thought Lisa was just a stay-at-home mom with no power or legal knowledge. He believed his eviction would go through without a hitch. Confident, he began spreading rumors around the building, telling other tenants that Lisa and her family were loud troublemakers who would soon be gone. The day before the court hearing, Mr. Davis even sent an email to Lisa suggesting she drop the case, adding, "It's not worth the trouble. You're not going to win. Just move out and save yourself the embarrassment." Lisa didn't respond. The day of the hearing arrived, and Mr. Davis walked into the courtroom with a smug grin, expecting to win easily. Lisa and Marcus sat calmly with their evidence, Lisa's expression unreadable. The judge called the case, and Mr. Davis strutted to the front of the room, ready to speak first. "Your Honor," he began, "this family has been nothing but trouble. Late payments, complaints from other tenants. I've tried to work with them, but it's clear they're not fit for this building." Lisa stood up, her eyes locked on Mr. Davis. "Your Honor, with all due respect, none of what Mr. Davis just said is true." Mr. Davis rolled his eyes, as if expecting a weak defense, but what came next wiped the smirk off his face. "I'm Lisa Williams," she continued, her voice steady. "I'm a real estate attorney with 10 years of experience specializing in landlord-tenant law. I've defended countless families facing unfair evictions, and today I'm defending my own family." Mr. Davis's eyes widened in disbelief. Lisa presented the judge with copies of every payment she had made, each one on time. She explained the baseless complaints and how they started only after the family moved in. She also revealed Mr. Davis's attempts to raise the rent illegally, quoting state housing laws. The judge's tone shifted, now focusing on Mr. Davis. "Mr. Davis, it appears you have no legal grounds for this eviction. In fact, this looks more like harassment." The landlord stammered, trying to defend himself, but it was no use. Lisa continued, presenting testimonies from neighbors who confirmed there were no noise issues. Mr. Davis had no choice but to sit and listen as his lies were systematically dismantled. After reviewing the evidence, the judge ruled in favor of Lisa and her family. The eviction was thrown out, and the judge ordered Mr. Davis to pay for the family's legal fees and damages for emotional distress. But the fallout didn't stop there. News of the case spread around the neighborhood, and soon, other tenants began coming forward with their own stories of mistreatment by Mr. Davis. The once powerful landlord now faced multiple lawsuits and a ruined reputation. Back at their apartment, Lisa and her family could finally relax. Marcus hugged her tightly. "I don't know how you stayed so calm through all of this," he said with a smile. "You really are amazing." Lisa smiled back, happy that the fight was over. "I knew we'd win," she said softly. "I wasn't going to let him bully us out of our home." As the sun set on their quiet neighborhood, the Williams family sat down for dinner, knowing they had not only protected their home, but also exposed a landlord who had been getting away with discrimination for far too long. They were no longer just tenants. They were a symbol of justice. On a sunny afternoon in downtown Chicago, the city was alive with the buzz of activity. Luxury cars glided past the shimmering storefronts, and the laughter of affluent patrons filled the air as they enjoyed their lattes in trendy cafes. In stark contrast to this bustling scene sat Marcus, a black man in his mid-40s, wearing a worn-out jacket that had seen better days. His scruffy beard and tired eyes told a story of hardship, but his presence commanded respect. There was a wisdom about him that stemmed from years of life experience. Marcus was no stranger to the streets. He had been homeless for 3 years, forced out of a life that once promised him everything. As he leaned against the cool stone of a building, he watched people pass by, lost in their worlds, unaware of the battles fought in silence. On the other side of town, Amelia Carter, a wealthy entrepreneur known for her charitable work, was having a rough day. Her latest venture, a tech startup aimed at helping underprivileged youth, was struggling to gain traction. Despite her best efforts, the business was on the verge of collapse, and with it, her dreams of making a difference. Frustrated and exhausted, she decided to take a break from her office and headed out for a stroll, hoping to clear her mind. As fate would have it, Amelia's path crossed with Marcus's when she spotted him sitting outside a bustling cafe. Something about his demeanor drew her in. Perhaps it was the calmness in his eyes or the quiet strength he exuded. After a moment's hesitation, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said gently, her voice breaking through the haze of his thoughts. "I know this might sound strange, but would you like something to eat?" Marcus looked up, surprised by the unexpected kindness. "I appreciate the offer, ma'am, but I'm not hungry," he replied, his voice deep and gravelly. "I'm just thinking." Amelia sat down beside him, intrigued. Thinking about what? He hesitated, glancing around at the people enjoying their lives. "Life, I guess. How easy it is to lose everything." Amelia's heart ached at his words. She could see the pain etched into his features, a stark reminder of the harsh realities that existed just beneath the surface of her privileged world. After a few moments of silence, Amelia found herself wanting to know more. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he replied, offering a small smile. "And you?" "Amelia. It's nice to meet you, Marcus." She paused, contemplating her next words. "I run a tech startup aimed at helping people like you. We provide resources and training for those who want to turn their lives around. Have you ever considered working in tech?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Tech? Me?" He chuckled softly, but there was a glimmer of interest in his eyes. "Absolutely. It's never too late to learn something new. I could use someone with your life experience. You have a unique perspective that could help shape our mission." Surprised by her enthusiasm, Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "What kind of work are you talking about?" "Anything from outreach to project management. We could start with training to see where your strengths lie," Amelia explained, her excitement palpable. "And I'd be happy to help you get back on your feet." Marcus's heart raced. He hadn't thought about working in years, much less in a field like tech. "I don't know if I'm qualified," he said, doubt creeping into his voice. "Qualifications can be learned. Passion is what matters. If you're willing to give it a shot, I'll support you," she insisted. After a moment of contemplation, Marcus nodded slowly. "All right, I'll give it a try. What do I have to lose?" Amelia beamed, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a sense of purpose rekindling within him. Over the next few weeks, Amelia and Marcus met regularly. She introduced him to the world of technology, showing him the ins and outs of her startup. To her surprise, Marcus was a quick learner. His analytical mind, honed from years of navigating life's challenges, proved to be an asset. He had a natural gift for understanding complex systems, and Amelia could see the spark of confidence growing in him. As they worked together, Marcus opened up about his past. He had once been a successful software engineer, living in a modest but comfortable apartment, with a steady job and plans for the future. But a series of unfortunate events, a sudden illness, the loss of a loved one, and a failing marriage, had spiraled him into homelessness. Each day on the streets had chipped away at his self-worth, making it hard for him to believe he could ever reclaim his life. Amelia listened intently, her heart breaking for him. "You've already shown resilience by surviving," she said encouragingly. "You can rebuild. Just remember, everyone has a story. Yours is powerful." As they collaborated, Amelia began to realize that Marcus was not just a project. He was becoming a friend. Their shared moments were filled with laughter and inspiration, a bond formed from understanding and shared struggles. Months passed, and Marcus was ready for his first official role at the startup. With Amelia's guidance, he had developed a training program aimed at helping homeless individuals gain digital skills. The day of the presentation arrived, and he stood nervously in front of a room full of potential investors. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "My name is Marcus, and I'm here to talk about opportunity. My life took a turn that led me to experience homelessness. But what I learned is that every person has the potential to contribute meaningfully to society." As he spoke, he shared stories of his struggles, the lessons he learned, and the importance of empathy. He detailed the program he had developed, how it would provide the tools and resources needed to empower those in similar situations. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. Amelia beamed with pride as she watched him flourish. She knew that this moment marked a significant turning point, not just for Marcus, but for her startup as well. As the meeting concluded, a well-dressed man approached them. "Impressive presentation, Marcus. I think you have a bright future ahead," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you," Marcus replied, shaking his hand with a newfound confidence. Just as they were about to leave, a commotion at the back of the room caught their attention. A familiar voice rang out, echoing through the space. "Marcus, is that you?" Everyone turned to see a woman in her 40s, her face pale and filled with disbelief. It was Sarah, Marcus's ex-wife. The last time he had seen her was on the day he left everything behind. She had moved on, or so he thought. "Sarah," he whispered, his heart racing. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited by a friend. I had no idea." She trailed off, her eyes scanning the room before landing on Amelia. "You're working with him?" "Sarah, please," Marcus said, raising his hands. "Let's talk privately." The two stepped aside, the tension palpable. "I didn't know you were in Chicago. Why didn't you reach out?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "I didn't want to drag you back into my mess," he replied, emotion choking his words. "I'm trying to get back on my feet." "You look different. You're doing well," she said, her eyes softening. "I'm trying. Amelia has been a huge help," he admitted, gesturing toward her. Sarah's gaze shifted to Amelia, and recognition dawned. "You're the one who started that tech program. I've heard of you. You're doing great work." Amelia smiled, but the atmosphere felt charged with unspoken emotions. "Thank you. We're all just trying to make a difference," she replied, unsure of how much to share. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "I've missed you. I've thought about you every day. I didn't realize how hard things were for you until I saw your name in the news. They wrote an article about your startup." Marcus felt a mix of emotions, anger, regret, and longing. "It's too late for us," he said softly. "I can't go back to that life." "But can we start over as friends? I want to support you," she pleaded. Marcus considered her words, knowing the road ahead would be complex. "I don't know, Sarah. I need time." Amelia watched the exchange, her heart heavy with the weight of their shared history. "Maybe it's time to embrace the future, Marcus," she said gently. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus's relationship with Sarah began to heal. They met regularly, talking through their past and the pain they both endured. While they knew they could never go back to what they once had, they found solace in shared experiences and a newfound understanding. With every meeting, Marcus felt a blend of hope and apprehension. Sarah's presence stirred old memories, both good and bad. He often wondered if rekindling their friendship was a step forward or a backward glance at a life he was trying to leave behind. However, as the conversations deepened, he realized that this was not just about the past, but also about healing and growth. At the same time, his work with Amelia was blossoming. The training program was gaining traction, and they received funding from local investors intrigued by the impact it could make. Marcus was excited to expand the initiative and help others in similar situations as he had faced. With Amelia's support, he organized workshops and outreach events, connecting with various homeless shelters and community organizations. Their first major event was set for the upcoming month, an open house showcasing the success stories of those who had benefited from the program. As Marcus prepared for the presentation, he felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. This was his chance not just to highlight the program's impact, but also to reclaim his identity as someone who could help others. Meanwhile, Amelia worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring everything was in place. She had become more than just a mentor. She was now a partner in Marcus's journey. As the day of the open house approached, she noticed the change in him. His demeanor was more confident, and his laughter came more easily. The spark that had once seemed dim now burned bright. The day of the open house arrived, and the venue buzzed with excitement. Attendees included potential donors, community leaders, and individuals looking for inspiration. The atmosphere was electric, filled with hope and possibility. As Marcus stood at the front of the room, he looked out at the crowd, feeling both proud and humbled. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady. "This program is not just about teaching skills, it's about restoring dignity and offering a path forward. Each of us has a story, and I want to share mine." As he spoke, he recounted his journey from success to hardship, and ultimately to hope. He spoke candidly about the dark days of living on the streets, the struggles that had led him there, and the resilience he discovered within himself. He shared stories of others he had met during his time in the program, showcasing their triumphs and transformations. Amelia watched with pride as Marcus commanded the room, his passion igniting a fire within the hearts of everyone present. By the end of his presentation, the audience was captivated. People began to raise their hands, eager to offer support, financial contributions, volunteer time, and resources. After the formalities concluded, attendees mingled and shared their thoughts. A woman approached Marcus, tears in her eyes. "Your story touched me deeply. My brother has struggled with homelessness for years. I want to help in any way I can." As conversations flowed, Marcus felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he was no longer just surviving, he was thriving. After the event, Sarah approached him. "You were amazing today. I'm so proud of you," she said, her voice genuine. "Thanks, Sarah. I couldn't have done it without Amelia's support," he replied, glancing at Amelia, who was busy speaking with a group of attendees. As they moved to a quieter corner, Sarah continued, "I know our past is complicated, but I want to be part of your journey. Can we work together? I have contacts in nonprofit sectors that could benefit the program." Marcus was taken aback. "You really want to help? After everything?" I've realized how much I took for granted when we were together. I want to support you now, not just as your ex-wife, but as a friend," she replied earnestly. Marcus pondered her offer. It was an unexpected twist, but he sensed a genuine desire to make amends. "If you're serious about this, I'd welcome the help. Let's see where it goes." As they collaborated, the dynamic between them shifted. They began to form a professional partnership rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Sarah introduced Marcus to various organizations that aligned with their mission, expanding their reach and impact. With Sarah's connections, the training program grew rapidly. They secured more funding, allowing them to hire additional trainers and expand their curriculum. Marcus found himself immersed in work that brought him fulfillment, but it wasn't without challenges. As the program gained notoriety, critics emerged. Some questioned the effectiveness of their approach, while others voiced skepticism about the potential for change. Amelia and Marcus were determined to address these challenges head-on. They organized community forums, inviting critics to discuss their concerns openly. During one such forum, a prominent local journalist challenged Marcus. "You speak of transformation, but what makes you think those who've fallen on hard times can truly change?" Marcus took a deep breath, recalling his journey. "I am living proof that change is possible. I was once lost, but I found my way back. It's not just about skills, it's about belief. When you invest in people, you empower them to see their worth." The room fell silent as Marcus's words resonated with many. His authenticity and determination shifted the conversation, slowly winning over skeptics. Months turned into a year, and the program flourished. Marcus had become a well-respected figure in the community, speaking at events and sharing his story to inspire others. He and Amelia had forged a strong partnership, driven by a shared vision of creating lasting change. As the program thrived, Amelia and Marcus often reflected on their journeys, their paths intertwined by fate, leading them to this moment. One afternoon, as they sat in the office after a successful event, Marcus turned to Amelia. "I couldn't have done any of this without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Amelia smiled, her eyes glimmering. "You did the hard work, Marcus. I just provided the platform. Your resilience is what makes this program a success." As they spoke, Sarah entered the room, her expression bright. "Great news! We just received a grant from a major foundation to expand our outreach program." Marcus felt a rush of gratitude. "That's incredible. We can help so many more people." Together, we're building something special, Sarah added, her tone sincere. The three of them stood united, looking out at the future filled with possibilities. A year later, they organized a community celebration to mark the success of their initiative. Former participants shared their stories of transformation, how they had found jobs, restored relationships, and gained self-worth. Amelia took the stage, her heart swelling with pride. This program isn't just about skills, it's about community, support, and love. Together, we're changing lives. As Marcus stepped up to share his journey once more, he couldn't help but glance at Sarah and Amelia, who stood in support. They had become allies in his quest for redemption, proving that even the darkest paths could lead to unexpected partnerships and hope. Life can be unforgiving, he began, but it can also be beautiful if we allow ourselves to grow and heal. Thank you for believing in me, and thank you for believing in each other. The audience erupted in applause, and tears filled his eyes. In that moment, he realized he was no longer the homeless man he once was. He was a beacon of hope, a testament to resilience, and a catalyst for change. As the celebration concluded, Amelia, Marcus, and Sarah stood together, surveying the crowd of inspired individuals. Each face represented a story of struggle and triumph, a reminder of why they had embarked on this journey together. "What's next?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Marcus smiled. "We keep going. There are still so many people who need help, and we're just getting started." Amelia nodded. "Let's continue to push boundaries and make a difference. Together." As they walked away from the stage, hand in hand, they felt the weight of the past lift. The future was bright, filled with potential, and their partnership was a testament to the power of compassion and understanding. In that moment, they knew that no matter where life took them, they would face it together, united by their shared vision of hope and healing. The gleaming sun was dipping beneath the horizon, casting a soft golden glow over the streets of downtown. Mr. William Grant, dressed in an immaculate tailored suit, strode confidently out of La Maison, Serene, a high-end restaurant known for catering to the city's elite. The valet handed him his car keys, and with a subtle nod, William eased into his silver luxury sedan. As he settled into the leather seat, adjusting the rearview mirror, a woman's voice called from the sidewalk. "Excuse me, sir. Can you help me, please?" He frowned, rolling his eyes before glancing out of the window. Standing on the curb was a slender black woman, perhaps in her early 30s, dressed in a simple blouse and slacks. Her face was composed, but there was a hint of desperation in her eyes. "My car broke down a few blocks from here," she said. "I just need a lift to the next service station or a call for a tow." William quickly scanned her up and down. To him, she didn't look like she belonged anywhere near La Maison. He imagined she was just another one of those people looking for a handout, an excuse to guilt him into helping her. He had seen it before. There was no way he was getting involved in someone else's problems tonight, not when he had his own to deal with. "Look," he said without even a flicker of sympathy in his voice, "why don't you figure it out yourself? People like you always find a way." The woman's expression tightened, but she didn't argue. She simply nodded, almost as if she had expected the response. "Thank you for your time," she replied quietly, turning away and walking toward the street corner. William rolled his eyes again, muttering under his breath, "Some people just don't know when to stop asking for help." He started his car and drove off without a second thought, not realizing that the woman he'd just dismissed would soon turn his world upside down. The next morning, William was back in his plush corner office at Grant & Co., his multi-million-dollar investment firm that dealt exclusively with high-profile clients. Today was important, critical even. He had been working for months on securing a partnership with Green Tech Inc., a booming environmental tech company that had been making headlines for its innovation in renewable energy. William had yet to meet the new CEO of Green Tech, but word on the street was that this person had taken the company to unprecedented heights in just 2 years. If he could land this deal, it would be one of the biggest milestones in his career. His assistant, Rachel, knocked lightly on his office door. "Mr. Grant, the CEO of Green Tech, is scheduled to be here in 30 minutes. William nodded, glancing over the proposal documents on his desk. He was confident. He always was. No one could say no to him when it came to business. He had a reputation for making deals others couldn't dream of. "Make sure the boardroom's ready," he said without looking up. "I want everything to be perfect." Rachel nodded and disappeared down the hallway. As the clock ticked closer to the meeting, William went over his pitch in his head. He knew this deal would secure his firm's future for years to come. He had even brought in his top advisors to ensure they impressed the CEO. Little did he know, he was in for a shock. The time arrived. William stood at the head of the large glass conference table, his advisors seated around him. There was a quiet confidence in the air, the kind that comes from years of success. The door opened and Rachel stepped in. "Mr. Grant, the CEO of GreenTech is here." "Perfect. Send them in." William straightened his jacket, expecting to meet an older, experienced businessman, someone he could relate to. Instead, when the CEO walked in, his confidence shattered. It was her, the woman he had dismissed on the street the night before. She walked in with an air of quiet authority, her sharp suit and composed demeanor commanding the room's attention. She wasn't the stranded woman in simple clothes anymore. She was someone else entirely, someone powerful. And in that moment, William's world tilted. Her eyes locked on his, and though her face remained professional, there was no mistaking the recognition in her gaze. She knew exactly who he was, and she wasn't about to let him forget it. "Good morning, Mr. Grant," she said coolly, extending her hand. "I'm Maya Cole, CEO of GreenTech." For a moment, William just stared at her, his mind scrambling to process what was happening. He managed to shake her hand, though his grip felt limp compared to her firm, confident clasp. Ms. Cole," he stammered, "it's a pleasure." The room seemed to buzz with tension. His advisors were oblivious to the undercurrent between the two of them, but Maya's calm smile held a hidden power that made William nervous. She took a seat at the table, setting her folder down, completely unfazed by the heavy silence that followed her introduction. William had always been good at talking his way out of uncomfortable situations, but today was different. As he launched into his well-rehearsed pitch, outlining the potential benefits of their partnership, Maya listened silently, her face unreadable. Her silence unnerved him. Every time he glanced her way, he saw not just a CEO, but the woman he had dismissed so easily, so cruelly. The woman he had assumed was beneath him. Halfway through his pitch, he faltered. His confidence, so ingrained in him, began to crumble. He could see it now, how wrong he had been, how he had let his assumptions cloud his judgment. He could almost feel her judgment weighing on him, though she remained perfectly composed. Finally, he finished. The room was dead silent as Maya leaned back in her chair, considering him for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Grant," she said, her voice steady, "I appreciate the work you and your team have put into this proposal. GreenTech is indeed interested in a partnership." William felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was premature. "However," Maya continued, "I've come to learn that business at its core is about people. It's about how we treat others, regardless of their station in life, or what we think we know about them." She held his gaze firmly, and William felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Last night, I found myself in a situation where I needed help," she said, "and you, Mr. Grant, were there. You had an opportunity to help a fellow human being, but instead, you chose to dismiss me." The silence in the room was deafening. William felt his face flush with shame. His advisors exchanged confused glances, not fully understanding what was happening, but the weight of Maya's words hung heavy in the air. "I don't hold grudges," Maya said, her tone still calm, but now edged with steel. "But I do make decisions based on character, and I'm not sure I can trust someone who looks down on others to lead with integrity." William swallowed hard, his mind racing. For the first time in years, he was at a loss for words. He had been so sure of himself, so sure that his wealth and status had granted him a certain immunity to accountability. But now, sitting across from the woman he had dismissed as insignificant, he realized just how wrong he had been. "Ms. Cole," he began, his voice strained, "I deeply regret what happened last night. It was a mistake, and I'm sincerely sorry." Maya didn't respond immediately. Instead, she regarded him for a long, uncomfortable moment. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but unyielding. "Thank you for your apology, Mr. Grant, but apologies don't erase actions. They don't change the fact that you showed me who you are when you thought no one was watching." Her words hit him harder than he expected. He had always prided himself on being a man of power and influence, but now he saw that none of that mattered in the face of true integrity. Maya stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "I'll consider your proposal, but know that GreenTech values more than just financial gain. We value character, vision, and respect." With that, she turned and left the room, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor, leaving William and his team in stunned silence. For the next few days, William couldn't shake the meeting from his mind. It was more than just a business deal slipping through his fingers. It was the realization that everything he had built his life on, wealth, power, success, meant nothing without the human decency that should have come with it. Maya's words echoed in his thoughts, reminding him that respect and kindness were worth more than the superficial value he had always placed on people's appearances. A week later, he received an email from GreenTech. It wasn't a rejection, but it wasn't an acceptance either. Maya had agreed to reconsider the proposal, but with one condition, that the partnership would be handled by someone else at Grant & Co. William knew why. He wasn't fit to lead the deal, not after what had happened. It was a harsh but fair outcome. A week later, William received an email from the GreenTech. The message wasn't the outright rejection he had feared, but it was far from the victory he had expected. Maya had agreed to reconsider the proposal.